Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the one and only peculiar fashion show in Plainfield, Wisconsin, where the darkest corners of human history intertwine with the world of haute couture. Today, we invite you to take a step into the macabre and explore the twisted creations of a man whose name has become synonymous with horror and depravity. Welcome to Fashionably Morbid, the E.G. Collection. Walking a sinister path that blurred the boundaries between life and death, sanity and madness. Amidst the bleak walls of his farmhouse, his fascination with the human form took a grotesque turn as he transformed the unthinkable into something tangible, clothing fashioned from the remains of his victims. Here come the models sporting the latest and only chilling ensemble of horror, crafted with the utmost attention to detail. A human nipple belt, patchwork of human flesh, a tapestry of bone, and a breast vest, a collection of otherworldly oddities, each with its own grisly tale to tell. Made from the delicate skins of his unfortunate victims, it serves as a testament to his desire for an intimate connection with the departed. Hello again, brace yourselves for a truly depraved tale of one of the most bizarre people you will ever hear about. The mother and son relationship is a significant bond that influences a child's development in various ways. Biologically, the connection starts during pregnancy and is strengthened through breastfeeding, releasing oxytocin and fostering emotional attachment. Psychologically, the mother serves as the primary attachment figure, promoting secure bonding, emotional regulation, and positive mental health outcomes. Emotionally, the mother's nurturing presence enhances a child's sense of security, emotional intelligence, and resilience. Cognitively, maternal interactions and stimulating experiences contribute to language development, cognitive skills, and academic performance. Mothers also play a vital role in shaping their sons' gender identity and attitudes toward women, while fostering social skills and healthy peer relationships. Understanding the significance of the mother-son relationship sheds light on the complex interplay between biology, psychology, and socialization in a child's upbringing. You will find out very soon how this goes very wrong when a mother parents their child in an extreme way. On the night of November 16, 1957, officers and investigators were looking into the puzzling case of a local woman who owned a hardware store. Bernice Wardens, the shop's owner, had mysteriously vanished without leaving a trace. Initial examination of the store revealed a trail of blood leading to the back of the store, a cash register emptied of its cash, a .22 caliber rifle casing, and a receipt for antifreeze bearing the name of a customer, Ed Gein. Ed was a reclusive and peculiar loner who spent most of his time on his farm. He was also spotted by witnesses as the one who had driven Bernice's truck away from the store around 9:30 a.m. on the morning of her disappearance. Compelled by his duty as a police officer and his personal connection as Bernice's son, Frank Wardens took it upon himself to launch an investigation into his mother's vanishing. He had also personally witnessed Ed entering the store on the evening prior to Bernice's disappearance. Frank alerted the authorities, providing the name Ed Gein as a person of interest as he had strong suspicions something fishy was going on with him. Investigators took a trip to the Gein farmhouse to pay him a visit, but he wasn't home at the time. The investigators decided to walk through the grim landscape of the farm. As they stepped foot inside the farmhouse, an overwhelming stench of decay assaulted their senses. The farmhouse was in complete chaos with garbage and filth throughout, foreshadowing the unimaginable horrors that awaited them. Little did they know that they were about to witness a nightmare come to life, as they were about to find out they were walking in a literal graveyard. No one could prepare the investigators for the horrors they were going to discover. It would be one of the crimes of the century. Inside the farmhouse, investigators found frozen human organs, meticulously stored in the refrigerator. In a box nearby, amongst the filth, multiple severed noses were stored. Another box was discovered hidden beneath the bed in the bedroom. It contained a box full of dried vulvas, 9 to be exact. Some were reportedly salted to further dry them out. There was also a collection of fingernails and remains of female fingers discovered. The farmhouse itself seemed to transform into a grave, for it held not only whole human bones in pieces, but also artifacts fashioned from the flesh of the deceased. There was also morbid furniture, clothes, and dinnerware. They discovered a wastebasket and chair seats made of human skin, and skulls used as bedpost decor. A belt was crafted from the nipples of female victims, became a disturbing symbol of adornment. They also found severed noses and human lips repurposed as a drawstring for the window shade. There was also a lampshade, stitched together from the skin of a human face, a chilling testament to the depths of madness. There was a corset constructed from the skinned torso of a woman, complete with a pair of breasts. Leggings made from the flayed skin of human legs, multiple plastic bags which contained 5 human heads, 4 skulls, and death masks consisting of skinned faces of up to 10 women, their expressions forever frozen in terror, mounted throughout the farm in a morbid display that defied reason and sanity, were a perverse tribute to the twisted mind of the creator. One of the faces that was found was so well preserved in a paper bag it would be easily identifiable if someone knew this woman. For dinnerware, there was bowls crafted from human skulls that were sawed across the forehead, spoons and forks had their handles inserted into bones. Finally, there was the discovery in the shed, a lifeless body suspended upside down by the ankles with the tendons deliberately severed and a rod inserted through them. With the help with pulleys, the body was hoisted into the air. The body was cut from the vagina to her chest, with all her entrails removed and sitting in a nearby bucket, mirroring the methods used in preparing animal carcasses. Shockingly, her head and vagina was missing. A nearby burlap sack would later reveal the identity of the body. In the sack was Bernice Worden's decapitated head staring right back at investigators. There was twine nailed into the sides of the skull, as though it was ready to be used to add to the ghoulish decor. The sight of this made the investigators vomit. Nearby in front of the potbelly stove laid Bernice's heart inside a plastic bag. The farmhouse stood as an emblem of human wickedness, delving into the abyss of the human psyche. Within those walls, the very essence of humanity was shattered, and the line separating life from death dissolved into a realm of unimaginable terror, filled with flesh, bones, and anguish. Following the murder of Bernice Worden's, a search was done for Ed, who was quickly located nearby in a neighbor's house and was taken into custody. The story attracted significant media attention due to the shocking nature of the crimes. Ed was dubbed the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul. The question that lingered was, what drove this seemingly mild-mannered and soft-spoken man to commit such abhorrent acts? Many people who had interacted with Ed in the past had described him positively. By all accounts, he appeared to be a decent individual, despite his preference for solitude. To understand the motives behind his unspeakable atrocities, we need to explore Ed's early life and examine the intricate dynamics between a parent and their children, particularly the role of the mother. Edward Theodore Gein was born on August 27, 1906 to George and Augusta Gein, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin. He had an older brother of 5 years, Henry. Describing his childhood as unhappy would be an understatement. His father, an alcoholic, frequently subjected his sons to physical and verbal abuse. Augusta endured a loveless marriage but clung to it due to her fanatically religious Lutheran beliefs. She refused to consider divorce. Part of the reason why she had a huge disdain for George is that he was timid and unable to hold down a stable job and was not bringing in sufficient money to support them, which Augusta viewed him as lesser of a man. Augusta was a commanding woman, and was determined to impart her religious beliefs upon her sons. Prayer was a daily event, and she continuously preached to Ed and his brother Henry from the Old Testament of the Bible, instilling the notion that all women were inherently wicked, prostitutes, and serving as tools for the forces of evil. Ironically, she exempted herself from this categorization, claiming superior knowledge. Mommy knows best, right? In this case, you will see that Augusta is far from a model mother. From an early age, Ed was already being brainwashed that all other women were inferior to his mom. Augusta created an environment where her kids would idolize her. So it should be no surprise to break it to you that Ed would be a virgin his whole life. I mean, what is the point to seek out another woman when your mother brainwashes you into thinking that they are evil? You would grow up weary of all other women. Augusta ran a grocery in La Crosse and became the main earner of the family. She eventually saved up enough money and decided to move her family to an isolated farm in 1914 to Plainfield, Wisconsin. The farm was over 150 acres in size. The reason behind this relocation was to keep the kids away from the supposed wickedness and temptations that city life provides. On this farm, there would be no neighbors for almost a mile away. Ed and his brother were already living a very sheltered life, not being granted the flexibilities to play and make friends like any other normal child. Most of their learning came from their mother, whom they believed every word she said. People always say, listen to your parents, but Ed and Henry took obeying your parents to a whole new level. Sometimes parents are not always right even if they want the best for you. Or in Augusta's case, what she believed was the best for her sons. She truly believed she was saving them from a life of wickedness by sheltering them and indoctrinating her beliefs on them. One of the reasons why Augusta decided to raise her sons this way was partly due to her failing marriage, which caused her to have a great disdain for men. Since being married, she was unhappy as her husband George was a weak man who was an alcoholic and seen as useless. She did her best to prevent him from raising the kids, as all he did was yell and abuse them. Augusta's unhappiness in her marriage served as a catalyst for her desire to seek happiness and fulfillment elsewhere. She believed that having a child would bring her the happiness she craved. To her delight, she gave birth to Henry, but as he grew older, her unhappiness persisted, and her marriage lacked emotional connection and intimacy and had a clash of values. She attributed her discontent to the presence of men in her life, including Henry, and began to blame the entire male population for her unfulfilled desires. Convinced that her life would take a different, more satisfying turn with a baby girl, Augusta yearned for a daughter. However, when Ed was born, Augusta resolved to prevent him from conforming to the stereotypes associated with men. She went to great lengths to treat him more like a girl, earning him the label of a mama's boy in their community. By all accounts, Augusta succeeded. Only she raised him to be emotionally stunted and socially awkward and was extremely attached to her due to constant coddling and overprotection. Ed was also shy, sensitive, and effeminate, with his speech patterns and communication impacted, as his mother's desire to shield him from traditional male traits resulted in a more delicate and gentle manner of expression. This was also exacerbated by a growth on his tongue that was present since birth. Augusta subjected Ed to emotional manipulation, implanting in him distorted beliefs about women and sex, depriving him of normal childhood experiences such as play, laughter, and socializing with peers. This upbringing shaped Ed's unique demeanor, diverging from the conventional male archetype. Ed and Henry grappled with the challenging terrain of social interaction at school. Despite having only 12 students in their class, Ed found himself becoming the victim of relentless bullying. His shyness was magnified by a congenital lazy eye, causing his left eyelid to droop, making him an easy target. Additionally, his manner of speech and uncomfortable stammer added to his torment. Ed failed to shine academically and was an average student, although he was a very good reader. While effeminate and withdrawn, he found solace solely in the companionship of his older brother. The walls of their secluded existence barred any outside contact, save for interactions with their mother, Augusta. Ed's world remained confined to the confines of their home, devoid of friendships or social interactions. Any attempt at making friends was met with condemnation from Augusta or lies about their classmates being wicked and bad influences. Ed and Henry, not wanting to upset their mother, just gave up on forming any friendships altogether. With the exception of attending school, the brothers were prohibited from venturing beyond the boundaries of their farm. Their days were occupied by chores and tending to the land, leaving little room for activities outside of their rural abode. Eventually, Ed made the fateful decision to drop out of school in the 8th grade. As their teenage years progressed into early adulthood, the brothers shouldered the burden of their family's financial struggles. Their father, a mere specter haunting their lives, spent all his money and time on alcohol, leaving the role of parenting to Augusta. But the emotional abuse did not stop there. Augusta's toxicity extended beyond manipulative lies, delving into a realm of verbal torment. Threats became her weapon of choice, unleashing a torrent of warnings upon her vulnerable sons. She insidiously planted the seed that should they dare to embrace their masculinity and behave like ordinary boys, they would inevitably succumb to the same fate as their father, an alcoholic and a failure. Augusta employed this psychological tactic as a means of control, leveraging their deepest fears to ensure their unwavering obedience to her every command. In the face of such relentless psychological manipulation, Ed and Henry's spirits wilted, their youthful innocence tarnished by the ceaseless barrage of falsehoods and threats. Their yearning for friendship withered away, replaced by a pervasive sense of self-doubt and the all-consuming desire to avoid disappointing their mother at any cost. Yet, despite all this, they loved their mother, especially Ed. Augusta provided for them and was their constant companion. Within the confines of their stifling existence, the boys became prisoners of Augusta's distorted reality, where lies and fear reigned supreme. The scars of her emotional abuse ran deep, shaping their perception of themselves and the world around them, leaving an indelible mark on their fragile psyches. Augusta also strongly condemned any discussion or expression of sexual desire. On one occasion when Ed was around 12 years old, Augusta caught him masturbating in the bathtub. Instead of reacting with understanding or embarrassment, she forcefully grabbed his genitals and referred to them as the curse of man. Shockingly, she proceeded to scald him with hot water. While it is known that testosterone can sometimes lead men to make foolish decisions, deeming male genitalia as the curse of man is such an extreme response to a harmless act is truly astonishing. Most parents would likely recognize the awkwardness of the situation for both parties, understand its naturalness, and advise their son to handle it privately by locking the door and continue with their day, without resorting to assault or making their child feel as though masturbation is sinful. Granted that Augusta was deeply religious, a long and frank conversation would be perfectly acceptable as an alternative to burning your son. The combination of Augusta's assault and her repeated lies about women and their supposed wickedness undoubtedly left Ed feeling confused and burdened with guilt. Consequently, his perception of sex and women became distorted. Adding to that, this was not his first sexual experience. Prior to this, around age 10, he snuck into the farm one night and had observed his mother slaughtering a pig. For whatever reason, the sight of the pig hoisted up, hanging by the feet and being cut open, and seeing its entrails spill out, aroused Ed, and he experienced his first orgasm. In my previous episode discussing The Night Stalker, I emphasized the detrimental effects of combining sexual experiences with gore, especially for young minds that are highly elastic. It is a troubling combination that often contributes to severe developmental issues during childhood. In Ed's case, his path had already taken a disturbing turn when he found sexual pleasure in witnessing the butchering of a pig. During Ed's late teens and early adulthood, he found himself engaged in a series of occupations, ranging from being a handyman to working as a babysitter. Surprisingly, he expressed a stronger connection with infants than with adults. This could be attributed to Ed's naivety and sheltered upbringing, which kept him closely attached to his mother even in his adult years, resembling the attachment babies have to their mothers. His brother followed a similar path in terms of employment, taking on odd jobs to contribute to the family's financial needs. While he also experienced loneliness, his attachment to Augusta wasn't as pronounced as Ed's. Ed's leisure time was primarily occupied by reading magazines and detective stories. He never went on dates and led a rather lonely existence, with minimal social interactions beyond his mother, brother, and seldom his father. His father, though present, seemed to merely exist, spending his days consumed by alcohol. In a peculiar way, Ed's life bears resemblance to that of Jeannie Wiley, a feral child. While Ed had more freedoms than Jeannie, he was similarly confined and subjected to psychological abuse. In both cases, their parents believed they were protecting their children through their treatment. In Jeannie's case it was the father, while for Ed it was his mother. If you haven't heard that story, I recommend you to give it a listen. I spoke about that case a few weeks ago. In 1940, George passed away from pneumonia. His death did not elicit great sorrow within the family, as he had been an absent figure despite residing with them. Even after his passing, Augusta frequently preached to Ed and Henry that their father's soul was destined to be in hell, considering him a failure in life, using it as a benchmark of a man not to be. On May 1944, tragedy struck the family again as Henry and Ed were burning away marsh vegetation on their property. Unfortunately, the fire quickly spiraled out of control, prompting the intervention of the local fire department. With their assistance, the fire was eventually extinguished. However, to everyone's surprise, Henry was nowhere to be found after the incident. Ed reported his siblings' disappearance, sparking a search party for Henry. Tragically, the search concluded with the discovery of Henry's lifeless body lying face down away from where the fire was. It was evident that Henry had been deceased for a considerable period. Upon examining the circumstances, it was initially speculated that Henry had suffered from heart failure or was overcome by smoke inhalation, as there were no visible signs of burns or injuries on his body when he was found. There was some bruises evident on Henry's head. Despite this revelation, the authorities dismissed the notion of foul play, and the possibility was disregarded. The county coroner officially attributed asphyxiation as the cause of Henry's death and that the bruises could be attributed to Henry falling and hitting his head on the rocks. Although the accident theory was accepted by the authorities, no formal investigation took place, and an autopsy was not performed. There were some suspicions that Ed might have been involved and that he murdered his brother. The theory was that in the last few years of Henry's life, he was quite defiant against Augusta and was no longer under her tight grip of control. Henry went out a lot more and was becoming more social and even dated a divorced mother for a few months. He also openly criticized Augusta and did not obey her and questioned Ed's devotion and unhealthy attachment to his mother. It is possible that Ed was upset and enraged as a result and could have resulted in Ed assaulting Henry to death and causing the fire as a ruse. Although this is speculation, it remains a possibility as no autopsy was conducted. Ed now found himself as the sole recipient of his mother's relentless religious tirades and volatile temper. As her health gradually declined due to stroke, her behavior grew increasingly erratic. She oscillated between fits of fierce anger directed at Ed and fleeting moments of tenderness. 2 years later, Augusta experienced another stroke. This time it was much more severe, ultimately leading to her death in 1945. During those final 2 years, Ed had taken on the responsibility of caring for his ailing mother, while immersing himself in books regarding the human anatomy, focusing particularly on women, in addition to crime and detective books. Ed was devastated, and it was this event that was the catalyst for his deviance as his behavior started to spiral out of control. For Ed, Augusta was the world to him, his only friend and companion and anchor that made life worth living. Everything he knew was from his mother. He had no one else and he had no eyes for anyone else, as his mother repeatedly brainwashed him from an early age that no one could live up to his mother. She was the best person and only woman for Ed, as all other women were inferior. In the beginning, Ed dealt with the grief by choosing to preserve his mother's memory by boarding up certain rooms in the farmhouse, keeping them exactly as they were at the time of her death, frozen in time, as if she still resided within their walls, transforming them into peculiar shrines. Having experienced a lifetime of sexual repression, Ed found himself having an overwhelming fixation on sex. His reading began to get more extreme, and it included lots of pornography, books on Nazi concentration camps and the cruel experiments that were conducted on the Jewish, and grave robbing. As Ed's preoccupation with his newfound obsession intensified, the once meticulous care that Augusta took in maintaining the house crumbled into neglect. The once clean home now bore the burden of neglect, transforming into a disheveled and filthy abode. Piles of junk cluttered, as if chaos had laid claim to every corner with exception of the boarded-up rooms which were pristine. So to summarize, Ed had a lifetime of sexual repression, fed lies about how all women are immoral and whores, except mommy. He had no friends, physically abused by dad, emotionally and mentally abused by mom. He also developed an unhealthy attachment to his mother, which progressed into adulthood, leading to the inability to deal with her death. It is beginning to make a little more sense into why Ed behaved the way he did. He wasn't able to live in a world without his mother. He was never given the proper support from his parents to be independent. He so very badly wanted his mother back. After his arrest, Ed was subjected to intense interrogation. At first, he denied any involvement in the murders, but it didn't take long for him to break down and confess to committing 2 murders. One of his victims was Bernice, which wasn't a surprise, given her corpse was freshly hanging in the shed when detectives walked through his farm. The other murder was a woman named Mary Hogan, a missing person from 1954, who happened to be a 51-year-old divorcee, and the owner of a bar in Pine Grove, Wisconsin. Ed had frequented her establishment on multiple occasions before. On December 8, 1954, Ed patiently waited for all of Mary's customers to leave the bar. When Mary was finally alone, Ed entered the bar and shot her in the head with a .32 caliber pistol, killing her instantly. He then transported her lifeless body back to his farm by dragging her on a sled for several hours. Given the era, evading capture for crimes was relatively uncomplicated due to the lack of video surveillance and the forensic tools we have now. The police had little to go on with Mary's disappearance, lacking witnesses and possessing only a bullet casing and some blood spatter as evidence. Mary's case remained unresolved for 3 years until the investigation into Bernice. Mary was matched to one of the death masks that Ed stored in a paper bag in his home. Regarding Bernice, Ed stated that he entered her hardware store, a place he had visited on numerous occasions, and wanted to buy antifreeze. He then decided he wanted to have a closer look at a .22 caliber rifle from the display rack. Bernice had done business with Ed before on numerous occasions and had no reason to fear him. After loading his own bullet into the rifle and aiming it downwards, he claimed to have heard a noise emanate from the weapon. Upon looking up, he discovered that Bernice had vanished. Approaching her, he discovered she had been shot in the head. He then placed her in the store truck, took cash from the register, and drove back to his farm. Investigation would later reveal that Bernice was shot in the back of the head. Initially, detectives expressed skepticism regarding the seemingly low number of victims compared to the multitude of corpses discovered on Ed's property. Ed candidly revealed to investigators he had a habit of robbing graves and taking body parts. In his exploits, he had frequented 3 local graveyards on approximately 40 occasions, targeting recently deceased middle-aged women who bore a resemblance to his deceased mother. He would take the bodies back to his farm, where he mutilated their bodies, fashioning them into grotesque trophies that he proudly displayed throughout his house. Ed maintained that when committing grave robbing and his acts of murder, he existed in a so-called daze, as if he were assuming an alternate identity. Most of the time he could not remember what happened, and on most of his outings he would return home empty-handed. In order to verify Ed's account, investigators had to exhume a few grave sites that Ed claimed to have robbed. Their findings provided evidence that substantiated Ed's confession. Some graves had been partially robbed, with specific body parts removed, while others had been entirely emptied of the corpse. For a decade, Ed adhered to a consistent modus operandi. He would scour the newspaper for recent burials, focusing on middle-aged women, and then visit the corresponding graveyard to take either complete corpses or specific body parts of his choosing. Once the parts or body was taken into his farmhouse, he would dissect the bodies, preserving particular organs such as heads, livers, hearts, intestines, and sex organs. Additionally, he would skin the corpses and fashion clothing for him to transform into a woman. This was Ed's way of coping with grief and the loss of his mother from a decade ago. He was trying to create something that could fill the void that his mother left. He wanted to adopt a different persona and gender when he would put on the woman's suit. Ed wanted to become his mother that he so sorely missed so much, that gradually, his fixation on the female form and his desire to become a woman propelled him toward seeking fresher specimens, which escalated into the murders of Mary and Bernice. When questioned about the possibility of engaging in cannibalism or engaging in intercourse with the corpses, Ed adamantly denied any involvement in such grotesque practices. He declared himself neither a cannibal nor a necrophiliac, citing the overpowering stench from the decomposing bodies as a deterrent to any sexual acts. In November 1957, Ed was charged with the murder of Bernice, as authorities believed it offered the greatest likelihood of a conviction. Despite his involvement in other serious crimes like grave robbing and the murder of Mary, these cases were not pursued due to budget constraints within the county. Simply put, they couldn't afford to conduct investigations into those additional crimes. Ed pleaded not guilty on the grounds of insanity, which seemed quite reasonable considering the nature of his actions. It was difficult for experts to unanimously agree on his mental state during his interviews with psychiatrists. The psychiatrists did note that Ed initially appeared and sounded normal in conversation for the first few minutes. However, as the conversation progressed, his discourse became increasingly bizarre. This made it easy to be misled into thinking that Ed was competent to stand trial simply because he could converse and discuss his case with his lawyer. Eventually, Ed received a diagnosis of schizophrenia, a condition that can cause hallucinations, delusions, and severely disordered thinking and behavior, impairing daily functioning. These symptoms were likely exacerbated by the extreme stress he experienced when his mother passed away. The diagnosis could also explain why he was always in a daze when he did grave robbing and murder. Throughout his life, Ed developed an unhealthy attachment to his mother and had a love-hate relationship with women. On one hand, his mother taught him everything and provided for him, but she also instilled in him the belief that all women were wicked and promiscuous, despite being a woman herself. This contradictory indoctrination left Ed emotionally and mentally stunted. Also to add to that were beatings inflicted by Ed's father, which further compounds the abuse. Ed had a complex mix of feelings towards women, experiencing both aversion and fascination. His intense curiosity and affection for women drove him to craft various items using women's breasts and genitalia. In addition, he engaged in the disturbing practice of creating clothing from the skin of corpses, enabling him to wear these disgusting garments to become his mother. Ed's emotional immaturity prevented him from fully comprehending the extent of Augusta's control and influence over him. Unfortunately, this lack of awareness ultimately culminated in his violent outbursts and murderous behavior, exposing a deeply unsettling side, fueled by a profound hatred towards women. Ed was deemed insane, therefore, unfit to stand trial. He was committed to Central State Hospital, a Wisconsin institution for the criminally insane, for an indeterminate amount of time. While committed, his assets were to be sold off at public auction. In March 1958, shortly before the Gein household was scheduled to be sold at an auction, a mysterious fire engulfed the entire house, reducing it to ruins. Speculation arose that the fire may have been intentionally set to prevent the property from being transformed into a disturbing House of Horrors attraction. There were rumors of potential buyers interested in such a business venture. Subsequently, Ed's car was sold at a public auction to a carnival sideshow operator for approximately $760. This shrewd operator then utilized it to charge spectators 25 cents each for the chance to see it. Dubbed the Ed Gein Ghoul Car, the attraction capitalized on the public's morbid fascination with murderabilia due to the shocking nature of the crimes committed. The land that was once home to the farmhouse found a new owner through the auction. The private buyer took on the task of gradually demolishing the barn and other outbuildings and then replanting trees and reclaiming the area over the next several years, aiming to erase the tragic events that had unfolded there in the past. In November 1968, after spending 10 years in the mental hospital, Ed made progress with dealing with his schizophrenia and was declared sane enough to stand trial for Bernice's murder. Although he was found guilty of the crime, it was determined that he had been insane at the time of the murder. As a result, he was returned to Central State Hospital. During his time at the mental hospital, Ed exhibited exemplary behavior and was regarded as a model patient. However, he had a habit of staring intensely at the female staff that made them uncomfortable, as it seemed to reflect a preoccupation with fantasies, obsessive thoughts, or a combination of rage and eroticism. Consequently, in 1978, he was transferred to Mendota Mental Institute located in Madison, Wisconsin, where he eventually passed away due to lung cancer in 1984 at the age of 77. He was laid to rest next to the grave of his mother in a Plainfield cemetery. No one attended his funeral other than the 4 staff assigned to duty at the time. Throughout his life and even in death, Ed's one true companion was his mother. Their relationship was deeply intertwined. Even after her passing, Ed's connection to his mother remained strong, shaping his actions and psychology. Ed's life was undeniably marked by a profound sense of loneliness and sadness. His existence was characterized by isolation, both externally and internally. Ed's upbringing in a dysfunctional family, coupled with the loss of his mother, left him emotionally scarred and socially disconnected. Ed's descent into darkness and his obsession with death, the female anatomy, coupled with his disturbed fantasies, due to years of sexual repression, further isolated him from society. His acts of grave robbing, murder, and the creation of human remains-inspired artifacts were fueled by a desperate longing for companionship that was provided by his mother. While it is crucial to acknowledge the darkness that consumed Ed's life, it is equally important to remember the victims and the impact his actions had on their families. Their lives were cut short, and their loved ones left to grapple with the incomprehensible tragedy that befell them. Ed's life serves as a reminder of the significance of cultivating healthy relationships, fostering social support systems, and addressing mental health issues before they manifest in destructive ways. The Butcher of Plainfield case has continued to captivate the public's curiosity. His life has become the inspiration for iconic characters in literature, film, and television. The character of Norman Bates in Robert Bloch's novel Psycho, or the visual image of a masked killer wearing human skin, as seen in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directly draws from Ed's disturbing acts. His legacy serves as a haunting testament to the depths of human depravity, forever etching his name into the annals of true crime history and popular culture. Please support me by smashing the like button and subscribing to my channel. Turn on all notifications for new upcoming videos.